Do you feel that Jennifer Soto will be arrested? Yes or no? Are the police building their case? And that's where I stand. And that's where I say, yes, the police probably went to the district attorney and said, this is what we got against Jennifer Soto. This is what we want to charge. And the DA probably said to him, we need more.
I just reported on this about the breaking news, and to hear Tim's perspective and yours about the news and the specificities of nothing has come to these interviews to our attention right now is the key in this. As everything we're seeing the information that she neglected her child heavily. There's lots of abuse going on, and she said the same story over and over with Stephan Stearns, who is going to be convicted hopefully one day of murder and sexual assault.
Their stories kind of mimic each other, and Tim said it good, like these are rehearsed stories. They either make it up as they go along, or they have time to sit and get their ducks in order. What happened is those two got together, and you even heard the same thing, because I listened to all of the audio recordings and interviews with not only Jennifer Soto, Stephan Stearns, but I got their parents too. I have the audio from inside the garage where the father tells the detectives, get this out of my house. His father, Chris, talks so badly about his own son, and talks about his son having brain damage, being run over by a car at a young age, and him and his friend were hit by. So there's so much that I've been able to listen to as it pertains to these stories. But Stephan Stearns, and the reason I brought up the parents, he told the same bullshit to them, and then they regurgitated it to the police. But when the father regurgitated it to the police, he said a couple of things. I think my son's full of shit. I don't think my son's telling the truth. I couldn't get him to work. I had to kick him out of bed to go to work. The father was giving him work, and he wasn't even getting up to go to work. I know you could talk about this all day and every day. How frustrating it was for you in major case when you had these cases and the DA said, we need just a little bit more to get those top charges. You got to go out and kick it, knock on some doors, gumshoe detective work.
Very routine. They want more. The more they have, the more secure that case is. They're gonna do everything they can. I still think that at some point they may be using her to charge him. I don't know what kind of psychological test they've done on her to see if she's even capable of being charged. I mean, there's so many factors that come into play, Ron.
He said that he feels like they are, what you said, trying to work out a deal to get her to testify. They have a mountain of evidence against Stephan Stearns. They don't need her to testify, in my opinion. What they need is to go after her and find her culpable and find her responsible for this child neglect, for failure to safeguard. You have a responsibility as a parent to make sure your child is safe within her home, and she failed to do that because she took a predator and gave him the green light to take her daughter by the hand and walk her to bedroom number 4 and sleep with her. Who does that as a good parent? None of us can say, and I don't even care if you're not a parent, none of us would feel right about saying that or doing that.
I still think they're going to charge her. There's no way that they're not going to charge her.
I agree with that, but it definitely backs up my thought of that with hearing you two say that. I mean, I've got 82 or 83 episodes of this, and every time I say #arrest Jenn Soto for what we can see her doing. So yeah, I don't know about child trafficking in the chat here, but we see the neglect, we see the obstruction of justice. There's 4 charges there that are felonies. So
I want to say that the child sex trafficking is not outrageous to think that, because of the way they set that house up. And who knows over 7 years how many people have come and gone from that home. How many folks who she leased or rented to month came and went and had teenage or adult teenage children that were jumping on the bandwagon. And maybe this scumbag Stephan Stearns was saying, hey, pay me this, you could do this with her. I hope and pray that
number 4.
Right. I hope and pray that that's not the case. But the way this whole apartment was set up, this dwelling was set up, And the Jennifer Soto showed no care or empathy for her flesh and blood. It's shocking to even talk about this, but I don't see this out of the realm of possibilities. God only knows what this poor girl went through. My heart breaks for Madeline Soto, and I know yours does too, Timmy, and yours does too.
Ron, in your experience, decades of experience in being a officer, have you seen anything like this besides Casey Anthony? Have you seen anything like this, where something like this big has happened and someone hasn't been charged?
So I worked in East New York and Brownsville, some of the toughest housing projects in Brooklyn. I saw a lot of child neglect and child abuse. I've seen a lot of cases where some people have skated due to lack of evidence. So the answer to that is yes, but also the secondary answer to that is more times than not, I would see the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office prosecute these cases to the fullest extent of the law. We're talking about a different day and age, though, Jay. This was in the 90s, where people were tough on crime. We had Mayor Rudy Giuliani in charge of New York City in the 90s. I was a cop in 1991. I became a detective shortly thereafter. And I spent a great decade of my career as a detective in the fugitive apprehension team and fugitive enforcement. But while I was on patrol, I saw a lot of sexual assault cases, a lot of rape cases that would get prosecuted and then, due to lack of evidence or at trial, gets pled down to lesser charges. So yes, I've seen this happen, but not on a grand scale like this, because back in the 90s, there was not the internet the way it is now. There was no YouTube lives. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. There was no Twitter. So now that this is amplified and everybody hears about it, it's more out there. Whereas back in the 90s, when Tim and I were cops, and Tim was probably a cop in the 80s as well, there was none of this. There was no news reporters with microphones. Maybe on the scenes of some of our murder cases, you would have a news reporter out there. I remember, but it was not transmitted onto all the socials. They didn't exist. So now, because we have these socials, it's amplified. Tim?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the laws have changed as well since the 1990s, 1980s. A lot of the laws have been tweaked a little bit in order to charge people properly. I have seen cases where somebody wasn't charged, or they were charged, and then when it went to court, it was what they call deferred prosecution, which just means that they're almost temporarily dropping the charges, waiting for more evidence so that they can bring the charges again.
Right.
This way, it doesn't go to trial and they lose, and then they can't retry them. Right. So I have seen that.
And the digital evidence was not as strong as what it is today. Right. We didn't have those smartphones. We had those silly little flip phones. We had the Nextel Direct Connects. So we're hearing more about them. We're hearing the details. There was no FOIA requests back then. There was no people rebroadcasting and transmitting audio interviews. We would just have audio. It would be a cassette tape recorder, audio, and they would record the interview and interrogation with no video.
So Ron, check this out, right? Let's go back old school. When you had somebody, right, that was with somebody else who committed a crime, what did you charge them? You charged them with acting in concert.
Yes.
So yes. I can't tell you how many times I've used that charge. They're just as culpable. They're just as guilty. They were acting in concert. Yeah. I see that in this case.